In this video, we'll be talking about dopamine and how we can improve our resistance to temptations and these very high dopamine activities. Because you can probably relate that a lot of our problems are that we know that we should do something, but we want to do something else. We instead start scrolling or watching YouTube or watching porn or playing video games. We know that we should eat healthy, but yet still we eat that chips, we eat that junk food. So hopefully I'll be able to help you with that, even if a little bit, with this video. Now, what is dopamine? Well, basically, when we're talking about dopamine, we're talking about a part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens. And this part of the brain generates our motivation. Now, how does it generate our motivation? It generates it by using dopamine as a signal. So basically, when we have some kind of action and we engage in it, depending on the outcome of that action, that part of our brain will release dopamine. And this release in dopamine will result in pleasure. Now, because it results in pleasure and we feel good, it will reinforce that action and it will make us more motivated to do it again. For example, if you're scrolling, you engage in that behavior, you engage in that action, and you like it, it gives you a bunch of dopamine, and that results in a bunch of pleasure. Now, because it resulted in pleasure, you will be more motivated to keep on scrolling and to scroll again. Now, what is very interesting is that to do something, we need dopamine. So if we have less dopamine, it will be harder to do something that we don't want to do. And if we have more dopamine, it will be much easier to do that thing. For example, if you have a lot of dopamine, then it will be much easier to study because your brain has more dopamine and it can release more dopamine. But if you have very low dopamine, then it will be much harder to study. So the point is that you need dopamine. It's not a bad guy. Dopamine is not a bad guy. Dopamine detox is not the point. You don't want to get rid of your dopamine because you need dopamine to do something, to get you motivated. The point is to get rid of the activities that drain your dopamine levels. Things like scrolling or watching porn or playing video games, because then afterwards you won't be motivated to do anything. Now let me explain. When you wake up, your dopamine levels are full. You have a full tank of dopamine. And every time you do some kind of action, you lose some of that dopamine. Your brain releases some dopamine. Now, of course, when your dopamine levels are at full, your brain can allow itself to release more dopamine on any kind of action, because just in the same way, when in your bank account you have a bunch of money, then you can allow yourself to spend more money because there will be a lot more remaining in the bank account. So just in the same way, when your tank is full, you can allow yourself, your brain allows it to release more dopamine. And then eventually, you'll do another action and you lose some more dopamine as you go on throughout the day. And then you get to a point where you have very little dopamine left in your tank. And at this point, you don't really want to do anything. And you'll need something very powerful, very high level dopamine activity, very dopaminergic, or however you say that activity, to squeeze that last bit of dopamine out. And now a great analogy to understand this better is that you can think of your dopamine tank as a fresh slice of lemon. And now you see, when you wake up, you have a full slice of lemon, all the juice is in that. And whenever you do some action, you kind of like squeeze your lemon and some juice comes out of it. And now, of course, when your lemon is still fresh and it has all the juice in it, even if you squeeze it a little bit, a lot of juice will come out. And now, when you get to the end of the day and your lemon is all like wrinkled up and it almost lost all the juice in it, you need a very strong squeeze to squeeze out the remaining juice in that lemon. And it's just the same with dopamine. You see, this is why it's so much easier to do the hard things in the morning and to resist temptations in the morning when you have a lot more dopamine. And why it's so hard to resist the junk food, resist watching porn, resist scrolling and playing video games when at night, when you have a lot less dopamine. Because it takes dopamine to do something. The more dopamine that you have, the easier it is to do the thing that you don't really want to do. Now here's a very important thing to understand if you want to resist bad habits and temptations. Now, as we said, when we wake up, we have a full tank of dopamine. But if we do something first in the morning that is a very high level dopamine activity, a very dopaminergic activity that releases a bunch of dopamine, it will empty our dopamine tank. Like if you scroll first thing in the morning or you play video games for 4 hours first thing in the morning, it will empty your dopamine tank. I mean, imagine if you have a fresh slice of lemon and you squeeze on it very hard, you will get almost all of the juice out of it. Why this is bad is because after those first 4 hours of playing video games where you drain your dopamine tank, after that you won't have any motivation to do anything. You won't want to do the stuff that needs to be done. You won't have any motivation left. You will feel like shit. I mean, just imagine, compare it. When you play video games for the first 4 hours in the morning, how much motivation do you have after that? And now compare that with studying for the first 4 hours of the morning, or doing something productive, working for the first 4 hours of the morning. I mean, how do you feel after that? How much motivation do you have after that? A lot more now, isn't that? After 4 hours of video games, you have absolutely no motivation to do anything at all. All you want to do is scroll, because you need that very high level dopamine activity to squeeze even that small levels of dopamine that you have left. But after, I don't know, studying for 4 hours, doing something productive for 4 hours in the morning, you still have a bunch of dopamine left. And you're still motivated to do something. You still can do something. So the key idea is that you don't want to do some high level dopamine activity first thing in the morning. If you take away one thing from this video, it should be this one. That for the first hours of the day, do something productive so that you don't empty your dopamine tank. Don't start scrolling on your phone. You shouldn't use any technology for the first 1 hour of the day because you don't want to empty your dopamine tank. Don't just go back in bed. Don't just do something stupid. Don't start playing video games. For the first couple of hours of the day, do something productive. Go work on something. Go study. Go exercise. Whatever. Do something productive so that you don't empty your dopamine tanks in the first couple of hours of the day, and then you don't want to do anything else for the rest of the day. So remember this: when you wake up for the first 4 hours, do something that you know that you should do. Go exercise, go study, do something, go read, whatever. Just don't do these stupid things like scrolling on your phones or using technology, watching TV, or I don't know, watching YouTube or whatever. Do something that needs to be done in the first couple of hours of the day. I'm guaranteeing you that this, if you just do this, this will change your days. And you see, if you change your day, if you change your morning, you change your day. And if you change your day for the better, you change your week for the better. If you change your week, you change your month. And if you change your month, you change your year, and so on, you change your whole life. And talking from the experience, first in the morning, doing the hardest thing first in the morning is the best way to get things done. I am the most productive in the morning. This is why I make these videos in the morning. It's also in the morning right now, because I don't want to do any kind of these high-level dopamine activity in the morning. I want to start the day off right. I haven't checked my phone at all. And I've been awake for how long? Let's see. I've been awake for 6, 7, 8, 4 hours. 3.5 hours I've been awake, and I haven't checked no technology. You could say I use technology, I wrote some script, and I'm recording on a camera. But I haven't done any kind of dopamine activity yet, and I feel great. I always feel great afterwards. So if you take away one thing from this video, remember this. Be very careful of what you do first thing in the morning. For the first couple of hours, what you do, choose that very carefully. I really recommend doing something productive that you know you should do. And also, as a side note, as we said in the beginning, that dopamine, when you release dopamine, it reinforces that action. So if you study first thing in the morning, since you have a full tank of dopamine, your brain will release more dopamine because of that. And because it releases more dopamine, it leads to more pleasure. And because it leads to more pleasure, it reinforces that action and you will be more motivated to do it again. So that's an extra bonus. Now, another thing that I want to mention about dopamine is that your dopamine can go up and then it can also come down. And of course, when your dopamine goes up, you feel good. And when it comes down, you feel bad. But every time it goes up, something that goes up, it has to come down. So when your dopamine goes up, it will come down. And you have what is called your baseline level of dopamine. And your dopamine, when it goes up from this level. And when it goes down, it goes below this level. And when it's below, you feel bad. When it's above, you feel good. And what's very interesting is that when you have high fluctuations of dopamine, when your dopamine goes up really high and then it comes down really low, you have this a bunch of times, what will happen is that your baseline of dopamine will go down. And now what this means is that overall, generally, you will feel worse. Like on a default mode, you will feel worse than you used to when you have these high fluctuations of dopamine. So what you can take away from this is that if you do a bunch of like very high level dopamine activities like taking drugs or scrolling a bunch or playing video games all day and spiking your dopamine a bunch of the times, what will happen is that your baseline level of dopamine will go down and you will just feel worse in general. So then another thing that you can take away is that don't do too many very high level dopamine activities that will really spike your dopamine a bunch of times, because that could lead to your baseline going down and then you feeling bad overall. I wanted to ask you something because I'm not really sure about something here, because at one place I heard that dopamine gets released while on the pursuit of something, on the pursuit of an action, and at other places I heard that dopamine gets released when you engage in that action. And the amount of dopamine that you release depends on the outcome of that action. And now I'm not sure, like, when does dopamine really get released? Like before the action, before you actually do that action and you get it, but while you're pursuing it, or after that action? You can leave a comment because I'm not sure about this. Now, another thing that we got to understand if we want to improve our resistance to these temptations is that when we have negative feelings, we are much more vulnerable to these high dopamine activities. I mean, you can probably relate to this. When you're sad, when you're depressed, when you're stressed out, you're much more likely to play video games or eat that junk food or watch porn. It becomes much harder to resist these bad habits when we feel bad, because dopamine numbs or shuts down our negative emotions. And negative emotions make you crave these dopamine activities much more. Because when we have negative emotions, we feel bad. And when we feel bad, how does our brain know to make us feel better? Well, let's just dump a bunch of dopamine and let's shut down those negative feelings with dopamine. You know, short-term pleasure. So when we have a lot of pent-up negative emotions inside of us, then we are much more vulnerable to these cravings and to these dopamine activities. And we are much more likely to get addicted to those activities. And when we deal with those negative emotions, when we have less negative emotions, then our resistance to those activities improves. So if you are already doing productive things first thing in the morning so that you're not draining your dopamine tank, and you're still really struggling with motivation, then one thing that you could try doing is working on your negative emotions. I mean, this could be something like going to therapy or journaling or meditating or even just going for a walk. You know, just Going for a walk and just letting your emotions process themselves naturally. Just feeling them completely, not resisting them, not pushing them down and ignoring them. And crying if you need to cry, weeping if you need to cry, screaming if you need to scream. Not resisting how your body suggests you to react to that pain, not resisting it, but going along with it. Going along with that pain and facing that pain. And you can do that by just going for a walk for an hour or half an hour every single day. That can help a lot actually, going for walks. And if you're interested in this kind of stuff that I talked about, facing pain and reacting to pain as our body suggests in a natural way, then I made a whole video about this where I go in depth to this, and it's very interesting. You can check it out, and it will be in the description. Now, another very interesting thing is that a lot of what we do is determined by a subconscious valuing system that we have. And this subconscious system determines the value of an action. For example, and it all does it subconsciously as it's included in the name. For example, if you're thinking about scrolling versus studying, which one has more value? You might think that you know that studying has more value, but if on a given day you chose to scroll or play video games instead of studying, then your subconscious mind thought that right now scrolling is more valuable than studying. And you can probably relate to this. You probably had this experience when you had this test coming up and you said to yourself, there's still 9 days until the test. Let's just play video games instead of scrolling. I still have a bunch of time. And then, there were 8 days left, then 7 days left, 4 days, 3 days, 2 days left until the test. And on the last day, that subconscious value judgment changes. Because now the consequences are higher. You only have 1 more day left. And now studying becomes more valuable. The consequences are bigger. And then you decide to study. So then, what we could do is change the value of an action consciously. Change it deliberately. And there's an exercise that I found that while making this video that can help you bring this last minute motivation and make it happen faster. And this exercise is called playing the tape through the end. So this is how the exercise goes. So basically, on a piece of paper, you write down 2 scenarios. One scenario when you engage in that bad habit, and another one when you don't engage in it. And you play the tape through the end and see the consequences of those actions. What will actually happen if you engage in those activities? For example, you write in one column what will happen if I study at 8 p.m. and what will happen if I play video games at 8 p.m. How would I feel at 9 p.m.? What would happen at 10 p.m.? What would happen at 11 p.m.? And then how would I feel at 5 p.m.? And then really be honest with yourself. Like really play it through. Okay, if I start studying at 8 p.m., what will happen at 9? What will happen at 10? What will happen at 11? If I start gaming at 8 p.m., what will happen at 9? What will happen at 10? What will happen at 11? And how will you feel a couple of hours after that? And really be honest with yourself. Like if you game for 4 hours in the morning, will you really do studying after that? Like, be honest with yourself. And now at the end of this exercise, you probably won't get this huge boost in willpower and instantly start studying. You might still end up gaming, and that is completely okay. Because you have slightly changed your subconscious valuing. You see, at the end of the gaming, you will feel like, I shouldn't have done that. You will feel this guilt doing that gaming, engaging in that bad habit, and it won't be as mindless. You won't just do that. You won't just engage in that habit mindlessly, but you will become more aware of the consequences of engaging in that bad habit, and it will change that subconscious value. So really think of the consequences of your actions. How will you feel after eating that junk food? Like really, how will you feel? You will feel awful. Like every time I eat junk food, I feel awful afterwards. I feel it in my belly, it's full, I'm stuffed, I got like this brain fog. Just think ahead a little bit. Think ahead of the consequences. What will that lead to? What will that lead to if you do this every single day? What will happen after 5 years? You see, how will you feel after watching porn? Play the tape through the end. Write it down on a piece of paper and compare the two scenarios. How will you feel after doing that thing? What will actually happen? And be honest with yourself. Now, of course, another thing that could help is willpower. And I made a whole video on willpower, on resisting things, improving your willpower. And so I'll leave a link to it in the description. You can check it out. So thank you for being here. Thank you for watching this video. If you're interested, I'm doing free one-on-one calls. You can send me an email. It's in the description, and you can ask me any question that you want, and we'll arrange a video call, and we can talk, and you can ask me anything that you want. So emailing is in the description. So thank you for being here. Hopefully this video was able to help you with something, and thank you for being here. Thank you for your presence. Have a great day, and goodbye.